Thank you, Ashley, for sharing your story. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Donna Byrd. When we were neighbors and little girls growing up in Alexandria, Virginia, carpooling to elementary school or hamming it up at the bus stop, I knew my friend Donna Byrd was special, and I wondered what she might do when she grew up. And I should have asked myself, what is it that she cannot do? Over the years, I've followed Donna's impact in this world of ours, and I was thrilled when we got in touch and she graciously agreed to be our keynote speaker for this special day. Raised in a military family with a father who was an Army general, Donna grew up in North Carolina and Virginia, graduating from high school in Germany. She received her bachelor's degree in American government from the University of Virginia, where she just recently delivered the convocation speech to the class of 2023. Then she earned her MBA from Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. In 2001, Donna helped renowned radio host Tom Joyner launch BlackAmericaWeb.com, one of the top African-American news and lifestyle websites, where she served as the founding chief executive officer. In 2008, Donna was hired by the Washington Post and named the founding publisher of TheRoot.com, started by Henry Louis Skip Gates Jr. Donna and her team grew The Root to become the #1 Black news site in the country. She unabashedly describes herself as a serial entrepreneur, and she's recently founded and is CEO of Blue Butterfly, which is a digital startup that is reinventing the funeral planning process. I think it's safe to say that Donna thinks about how to get information to people when they need it most. Donna's a Henry Crown Fellow at the Aspen Institute and serves on the boards of Black Girls Rock, an empowerment organization for young women of color, as well as the Bail Project, a national revolving bail fund serving as a critical tool to prevent incarceration and to combat racial and economic disparities in the bail system. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you my inspiring friend, Donna Byrd.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Kirsten. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be with you this morning, and it's particularly special for me to be with you because your CEO and my childhood friend is here, Kirsten Sikkelee. I grew up as a military brat, as Kirsten mentioned, and since we moved around, my mother and father wanted to ensure that we always had a physical home to come back to, so they purchased a house in Alexandria, Virginia. It was a very smart move on their part because it was a 10-minute commute to the Pentagon where my father was stationed, a 15-minute drive from Washington, D.C. It was across the street from a high school and a fire station, and little did they know, it would be down the street from Kirsten and Derek Sikkelee. Now, Kirsten was 2 years older than me, and from my perspective, it just meant that she knew everything. It didn't matter that she was just 8 years old when we met. To me, she was smart, worldly, and she oozed cool. I didn't have an older sister, so I paid attention to everything that Kirsten did. I remember she used to have this hair flip and a slight head shake that she did, and I thought it was very necessary to copy it. Now, Kirsten had this long, beautiful, flowy hair, and she would always take her fingers, flip her hair from her face, and tuck it behind her ear, and then do a little head shake. Now, I'm sure that my attempt to do the Kirsten Sikkelee hair flip was comical because it predated the blow-dry bar, and though my hair didn't move quite like Kirsten's. In fact, I had 2 curly puffs right in front of my head, and no matter how much I tried to do that flip, I was more like batting 2 puffs. And it didn't quite have the same Kirsten smooth move. Nonetheless, I'd bat those puffs, and usually they'd bat me back. I'd do my little head shake, and in my mind, I was cool like Kirsten. I admired her then, and I deeply admire her now. The work that she is doing and the work that many of you are doing is the work that matters in this world. It's the work that moves people and moves communities forward. So thank you for asking me to speak here on your 118th anniversary. To the board, to the staff, and to all of you in this room that help support the work of the YWCA of Central Carolinas. It is a true honor. Before I get into my remarks, I'd also like to acknowledge my sister who is here with us today. My sister moved to Charlotte 1 year ago to open she owns the Chick-fil-A at Prosperity Road, so I have to give her a plug if you're ever near Prosperity Road. My sister Rosalind, who's right here. That is her store. So she's new to Charlotte, and if you get a chance to, please swing by and buy some chicken. I lived in the neighborhood where Kirsten and I met for a few years, and then we started moving to support my father's military career. Every 2 years after that, we moved. His tours took us to places like Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of the 82nd Airborne, Warrenton, Virginia, which at the time was a rural town in Virginia, where I remember being surprised that some of my friends wanted cows and pigs for Christmas, and Heidelberg, Germany, where I graduated from high school. I'm often asked, what was it like to have to move around all the time? And I always respond, it wasn't too bad. Granted, I missed my friends each time I moved, but each time we set foot on a new military base anywhere in the world, it felt like home. It may have had something to do with the fact that no matter where we were in the world, if we were on a military base, at 5:15 p.m., a cannon or a bugle would sound, and everyone on the base, including the kids, would jump to attention, and we would all pause to honor the U.S. flag as it was lowered. Or it may have had something to do with the fact that no matter where we were, you could see school kids mimicking their parents as they walked to school. In fact, it was not unusual to hear the kids yelling cadences like, "I don't know what you've been told, but this here school is getting old. We should go and take a rest so we don't have to take this test." Left, 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 right. And just like that, 10 and 11-year-old kids on their own accord would emulate what they saw their dad and moms do, and they would march to school in step. It may have something to do with the fact that Army Jeeps and tanks were as common as Hondas driving down the street, or that kids in each of our new schools always welcomed us. They may have been so welcoming because they had to move every couple of years as well, and they knew what it felt like to show up somewhere where no one knew you and desire to fit in. Typically, kids would ask a series of questions in a quick effort to figure out something about you. The first question, and usually the most common, was, which bases have you lived on? If you said something like Fort Bragg, someone would make the connection and say, well, you should meet Lisa, John, and Maria. They lived there too. And in the event that you named a place that no one had lived, kids would gather around, and the next question would be, well, what was it like? Because all the kids knew that there was a chance that they might have to move to that place one day, and they wanted to learn from you. In retrospect, the way we formed bonds and community as kids with people that may not have looked like us or talked like us was to look quickly for shared experiences. And those shared experiences enabled us to find common ground and feel comfortable and welcomed. There was something else that existed on those bases that permeated the air and was deeply woven into the fabric of the community. There was something greater that united us in a way that superseded any of our shared experiences, and it was the existence of shared values. You see, all of our parents had dedicated their life to service. They lived and worked for something greater than themselves, and they approached life with a true commitment to duty, honor, and country. Around the time I was living in Germany and applying to U.S. colleges, I was asked, what is the greatest lesson I'd learned in my lifetime? Now, I was only 17 years old, but I traveled around the United States and to a number of countries, and I remember thinking for a moment, and the answer quickly came to me. It was simply, I'd visited and lived in a number of different places, and pretty much everyone in the world was the same. Now, most of us know that our basic needs are the same. We have the same need for food, water, shelter, and rest. But if we dig a little bit deeper, we find that many of our wants are the same as well. We as people are the tribal, and we have a desire to belong to a group, whether it be a family or sports team or school or some type of organization. We want to be respected. We as people feel the need we as people need to feel like we've accomplished something or contributed in some way to society. And we as people want a better life or world for our children and our grandchildren. So I'd like to spend a couple of moments today talking about we the people. The words we the people often evoke a sense of pride in who we are as a country. They are, of course, the first words to our Constitution. And if we read the entire preamble, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for common defense, promote general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We find that the values of expanding liberty, opportunity, and equality for all Americans, and the pursuit of creating a more perfect union, it is what has guided our social progress in this nation. It is a clarion call for us to be a better people and to set high expectations for our country. The sad thing is recently it has felt a little broken. Recently, we have felt like we are living in a more divided country. I had a brief conversation the other day with the editor of USA Today. They are partnering with the Kettering Foundation to create a feature series called Hidden Common Ground. The purpose of the project is to explore areas of agreement on major issues facing the nation and spotlight how individuals and local communities have reached across divided lines to solve problems. If you haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to search for it on USA Today. It's not only informative, but in light of the divisiveness that many of us are feeling, it is refreshing to read about the things we have in common and learn how we can take the best of what is proposed on both sides of the aisle and arrive at solutions that might work. They're only 3 months into the project, but I must admit I was a bit surprised to find out that if you remove the rhetoric, we agree on quite a number of things. What they found is that regardless of party affiliation, nearly everyone wants to see the nation's healthcare system improved, and they want major changes. This includes people for whom the system is working well. 72% of Americans say they want to reduce the effects of climate change, including a majority in each party. 85% believe that we should teach children how to resolve conflicts more constructively. And according to USA Today, if you ask women in America what their concerns and legislative priorities are, you will find that they are overwhelmingly aligned across perceived differences of age, race, political affiliation, education, and geography. Women share an agenda that prioritizes the health, safety, economic, and caregiving issues that are central to our lives. So if we're aligned on so many issues, why have we become so divided? Why have we become so suspicious of one another that we call the police when a black student is sleeping on a couch in her dorm, or when a young black man is walking up the stairs in his apartment building? Why have we decided that the winner of a debate depends on who lands the most punches versus who shares the most thoughtful policy ideas? Why have many of us across the nation stopped talking to friends and family members who have different political leanings? I would assert that we are in a period of othering, and instead of inspiring to act, we the people have fallen into a trap of us versus them. In Liliana Mason's book, Uncivil Agreement, she refers to a fascinating study that was conducted in 1954 by Musharraf Sharif and his colleagues. They found 22 fifth-grade boys and sent them to 2 adjacent campsites in Robbers Cave State Park. Now, this wasn't just a random sampling of 22 boys. The researchers selected boys that were nearly identical to each other in social, educational, physical, and emotional fitness. They were all white, they were all Protestant, and they were all middle class. None had ever met before, and none of them knew why they were participating in a 3-week psychological experiment. They were divided into 2 teams that were designed to be similar in every way possible. One team decided to call themselves the Eagles, and the other ones called themselves the Rattlers. During the first week, the teams were kept separate. The boys on each team began to bond and create a strong sense of team and group. At the beginning of the second week, the teams learned of the other's existence. Having never met the other team, The boys on each side began to refer to the other team as outsiders, intruders, those boys at the other end of the camp. And they grew impatient for a challenge. The experimenters arranged for the tournament between the two teams. When they interacted for the first time to play baseball, one member of the Eagles called the other Rattlers that dirty shirt. I have to chuckle because that was back in the 50s. I think the word might be much worse now. By the second day, both teams were regularly calling each other's names and using derogatory terms such as pigs, bums, and cheaters, and they were reluctant to share time with members of their team. Even the boys who weren't playing in the games hurled insults at the opposing team. In the next few days, the relationships between the teams quickly degraded. The Eagles burned the Rattlers' flag. The Rattlers raided the Eagles' cabin in the middle of the night. The Eagles responded by raiding the Rattlers' cabin in the middle of the day. And boys from both sides began to collect rocks to use in combat. Fistfights broke out, and the staff decided to stop the interaction and send the boys back to their respective camps to avoid injury. In a handful of days, 22 highly similar boys who had just met formed two warring tribes with only the gentle nudge of isolation and competition. By the start of the third week, the conflict had affected the boys' ability to judge objective reality. They were given a task to collect as many beans off the ground as possible. Each boy's collection was viewed by groups on an overhead projector for 5 seconds. The campers were asked to quickly estimate the number of beans collected by each child. Every single boy estimated more beans for their own teammates than for the children on the opposing team, even though the experimenters had shown them the exact same number of beans every time. The Robbers Cave experiment was one of the first to look at the determinants and effectiveness of group membership in intergroup conflict. It was a catalyst for years of wide-ranging research looking into exactly how group memberships shape us, affect our relationships with outsiders, and distort our perceptions of objective reality. The boys in this experiment needed nothing but isolation and competition to instantaneously consider the other team members to be dirty bums, to hold negative stereotypes about them, to avoid social contact, and to overestimate their own group's abilities. Even though these students were as like as they could possibly be, the experimenters did not allow them to spend time having conversation. They did not have a moment to talk about their shared experiences or their shared values, and they were not working towards something greater than themselves or their respective tribe. So what happens when society neglects to look for these things? We often retreat and communication breaks down. When this occurs, we are no longer able to solve the problems that plague our communities. Instead of solving the problems, we began to adapt to a new normal. Instead of working together to create gun legislation we agree upon, we have to have active shooter drills and teach our children how to hide under desks. Instead of agreeing upon and enforcing strong responses to bad actors on a police force, we accept that a traffic stop may just cost more than a fine. Instead of creating laws that will protect the planet for our children and our grandchildren, we ignore burning jungles and melting ice. And instead of borrowing solutions from both sides of the aisle to address immigration, we watch as Lady Liberty folds her arms. When we reach across divided lines, we can draw upon the vast talents, strengths, and innovations of our collective society. If I start crying, my eyelashes are going to fall off. Let me collect myself. Thank you. When we reach across divided lines, we can draw upon the vast talents, strengths, and innovations of our collective society to tackle the most challenging problems that face us. When we focus on solving problems that are greater than our own desires, we recognize commonalities among people rather than differences. We seek cooperation instead of division. We extend open hands instead of clenched fists. So how do we fix our current situation? The good news is I believe it is fixable. I don't think we should wait for it to happen from the top down or think that it might take an attack or a crisis to bring our country together. I believe we can start from the bottom up. I believe that some of the first steps are simple, but I must admit they might be a bit uncomfortable. I believe we must learn a lesson from the Eagles and the Rattlers and stop othering and demonizing one another. If we hear people saying things like those, fill in the blank, are awful and stupid or lazy, they're demonizing. Either turn the channel, select another article on your phone, or perhaps chime in on social media and type something like, "This conversation is not moving us forward." Or is there anything that you would agree with them on? I believe we can take lessons from the kids on the military bases all over the world when we are faced with someone new and start asking questions to find shared experiences. It's important for us to take the time to peel back layers. I'd actually like to extend a challenge to you. Let's call it Hi Neighbor. The next time you are standing in line or waiting at an airport gate or just have a few extra minutes when you are out, talk to someone you don't know. Tell them you are participating in an experiment to find common ground with people and start asking questions like, where did you go to school or where are you from? Do you like the Carolina Panthers? And it doesn't matter what you ask. What matters is that we start talking to people again. When we do, we will discover the many things we have in common. And if you're not able to find something in common in the first few questions and you feel uncomfortable asking more, do exactly what those kids did on the military bases and recognize that if your experiences are different, you might have something you can learn from that person. I believe if you do that, it will help facilitate conversations around shared values. Remember, statistically speaking, we have many of the same core values. And if we are able to respect the person we are talking to and agree that we have these values, we can start a harder conversation about solutions to difficult problems. I also believe that there are many places besides the military where you can see shared values in action. In fact, one is right here at the YWCA. Every single day, there are people working at the YWCA who have shared values, and they have dedicated themselves to common goals that enable them to tackle the challenging problems of ending racism, empowering women, promoting peace and justice for all. I believe this because yesterday I did a tour of the YWCA, and I was able to see the results of what can be achieved when you share values. I was able to hear it in the stories told by Sheila James, the Regional Director of Youth Programs, Rebecca Stickle, the Director of Women in Transition, and Kenya Henderson, the Director of Families Together. And I was able to feel the progress when I walked through the halls, watched the children study and play, and witness women who may have fallen on tough times at some point in their lives hold their head high as they walk to their rooms. The USA Today project that I mentioned before mentioned that 75% of Americans believe that there is more agreement in this country than the media portrays, and they are right. We, the people, have the power to move past divisions that exist in this country. We have the power to change things, and we just have to be willing to reach out and begin to find common ground. Thank you.